Okay, everybody, we're going to take a real close look at those final drafts of your essays before you turn them into Turnitin.com. So this is a little self-check. Some of you should be checking your own essays, but yes, some of you are checking an essay for one of the other team that you're working with. So we're going to look at the introductions first, and what you're going to do is take a look at that sentence where you've introduced the book title and author, circle the sentence that you've done that in, and then just do a quick evaluation. Put a question mark by there if you have questions about this part. There's something that you're not sure about, okay? Write that question down for yourself. Don't think that you're going to remember it. Put a plus by that part of the introduction if you've done it and you can't see how you can do it any better. Put a check by it if it's there and you're satisfied with it, you think it's proficient, but there's a possibility that you can make it better. And then put a 0 in that place where it should be, which should be the first sentence, if it's not there at all. And again, if it's not there at all, write down what's missing. Don't rely on your memory to tell you later. Second thing you want to do is take a look at the critical background information that you've provided. You know, this is the plot summary and the information about the characters that all kind of tie into the concepts that show up in your thesis statement. So first of all, ask yourself, have you provided enough background to make the book's connection to the thesis clear? If you're not sure about it, put a question mark by it. If you think you have and it's as good as you can make it, put a plus by it. If you have done it, but you see ways that you could make it better, then put a check by it. And if you haven't provided that at all, put a 0 by it, and then again, make a little note to self, what is it that you're missing? Then you want to underline your thesis statement and put a box around the attitude in your thesis statement. Now remember, the thesis statement should be the very last sentence in your introductory paragraph, and usually the attitude in a thesis is going to be in the predicate part of the sentence, usually. So double check that and make sure that you've got something there. And also make sure that you've got concepts in your thesis. Do you have nouns in your thesis, in other words, that represent things that you cannot sense through one of your 5 senses? So the first thing you want to do is ask yourself, does the thesis statement follow the one thing rule? If you're not sure, you have questions about it, write down those questions, put a plus by it, again, if you think it's done as well as you can do it. Put a check mark by it if you've got something there and you think it works basically, but you also see a way that you can improve it. And then put a 0 there if you know that that's something that you've missed, and just write a note to yourself about that. Next, ask yourself, does the attitude that you've put a box around provide an interpretation that requires some analysis to support? So in other words, have you avoided the obvious things that are actually stated directly in the book, and have you avoided statements that are so vague that it's really hard to tell how you would prove them anyway? And again, question mark, plus, check, or 0, depending on how you feel about what's there. And then finally, like I said, check to make sure that your thesis has a concept, in other words, a noun that you can't sense. Question mark, plus, check, 0, depending on what you see there. Okay? Once you're done with the introduction, you can stop this video, finish it up, and then start it again when you're ready. Okay, body paragraphs. You're going to have to do this for each one. So you may want to rewind this section and do it for however many body paragraphs you and your partner have. So first off, you're going to look for the tell me. And remember, you want to underline that and put a box around the attitude, because the tell me should have an attitude just like the thesis does. Now, obviously, it shouldn't be exactly the same attitude, but it should be related. It should be a step along the way of proving the attitude in the thesis statement. And again, you got to ask yourself a similar question about the tell me. Does the attitude provide an interpretation that requires analysis to support it? In other words, have you avoided the obvious or the vague? So again, you don't want to be saying something that's already pretty much directly stated in the book, and you also don't want something that's so vague that it's going to be hard for your reader to tell exactly what you're trying to prove in this particular body paragraph. So give it a little evaluation, question mark, plus, check, or zero. And remember, make notes to self about everything except for the pluses. Don't rely on your memory. Next up, you're going to put brackets around the show me. So remember that the show me should start right after the tell me, and it ends with the page citation at the end of your passage. Now, what has to come before the passage is the context. Remember that you need at least 2 sentences, and in those 2 sentences, you're providing information first of all about the situation. So that means you're providing a little plot summary. And then you're identifying the speaker and the audience. And also make sure that you take a look inside your quotation. Are there pronoun references in there that are unclear to the reader, or anything that's referenced in that quotation that the reader who maybe hasn't read the book in a while might not get? Or definitely, fill in information for the reader who hasn't read the book at all. So make sure that everything in there, everything that you put in your context helps to make what's going on in the passage clearer. Again, do a little evaluation, question mark, plus, check, or zero. The next thing you want to do is circle the integration. Now remember, if you're doing integration right, it's also providing context, because integration is basically where you look for that first quotation mark and look backwards. If the first thing that you see is a period, then you know you have a problem. But if it's colon, if it's a comma, if it's the word that or something else, then you know that you probably have integration there, because you're looking from that first quotation mark all the way back to where you see a period. Okay, stop when you get to the period. If it's the first thing you see, it's a problem. So again, evaluate it. Is your integration providing context for the passage? Meaning, have you already underlined this? If you haven't, there might be a little problem there. So again, question mark if you have questions about it and you're not sure, plus if it's as good as you can make it, check if it's there, you think it's proficient but it could be better, and a zero if you don't have it at all. And remember, notes to self, all right? Future self is very forgetful. Next, you want to look at whether the passage is correctly cited and punctuated. So write a little note to self. If you don't have the book with you, then you need to write a note to self to double check your quote against the book, because remember, this is one of the most commonly committed tragic errors. So make sure that you avoid that at all possible costs. Now, the other thing that's going to help you aside from the book in this section is when you're looking at punctuation, take a look at the quotation, integration, and citation packet that you got a few weeks ago. If you can't find it, it's also on Blended Schools in the writing folder. Double check that, because that has some examples. For example, if you need a blocked quote or something like that, it will show you how to do that, how to set it up, and how to properly punctuate it. So make sure that you're double checking all of that stuff, because remember, these are the most commonly committed tragic errors, especially if you messed up some of this stuff in your SRP essay revision. All right, next up, take a look at the so what. Now, the so what should be pretty much everything that follows the citation of your passage till the end of the paragraph. One of the big things that a lot of people missed the first time around with the SRP essays was to make sure that the so what is pretty consistently focused on the passage and the original tell me in the body paragraph. A lot of you were kind of wandering off and talking about other parts of the book or making claims that the passage at hand couldn't support. So take a really close look at this, because this is where a lot of you lost points on the first round with the SRP essays. First thing you want to do is underline the analysis. Make sure, do a count, all right? Now, quality and quantity are not always the same thing, but if you don't have at least 2 sentences or more of just analysis, we're not even talking about the explanation here, just analysis, then you probably don't have enough. Either your passage that you've chosen doesn't give you enough to analyze, or you really haven't looked at that passage closely enough and discussed how it inspires your interpretation. So you need to go back into that. Second thing you want to do is ask yourself, does the analysis answer some of the basic questions of analysis and actually break down your evidence and interpret it? So remember, you have things like connotations. Have you requoted from the passage? If you haven't requoted from the passage, you might as well give yourself a 0 right there, right now, because that is one of the things that you have to do whenever you're analyzing. So if you're not requoting and examining the connotations of those words and phrases and images that are in the passage, you haven't done analysis. So no requote, put a 0. Motivation. One of the other things that some of your sentences of analysis can do is to sort of speculate as to why a character is doing whatever he or she is doing or saying in a passage. And then last but not least, you can have a sentence or two in there that's pointing at anything significant about the speaker, the audience, or the situation for this passage. So again, question mark, if you have some questions about this, write down what those questions are. Don't trust future self to remember. Plus, if it's as good as you can make it. Check if it's there and you feel like it's proficient, but you see some ways to make it better. And a 0 if it's missing. And again, write a note to self. Don't trust future self, and say what exactly it is that you're missing so that you know what to put in there before you turn it in. All right, and then finally, look at the explanation. All right, now remember the explanation has to refer back to the tell me of your body paragraph, and it doesn't have to refer directly to the overall thesis, but the reader should be able to see pretty clearly how it's connected. The explanation really only has to be a sentence or maybe 2 at the very end of that body paragraph. So just ask yourself, does the explanation refer back to the tell me of your body paragraph and your overall thesis? If there's not clear connections there, then again, that's something where you're either putting a question mark there or a check, or maybe even a 0 if you realize that you don't have anything. All right. Now, just some other kind of stylistic issues that we want to take care of. And one of those is referencing the words, not the passage. Here's what I mean. You want to get rid of the following words: passage, quote or quotation, page or chapter. Because if you're talking about passage, quote, or quotation, that's referencing the passage. But what you really want to do is look at the words in the passage, or the actions in the passage, or the imagery in the passage. So, this quote says, or this quote displays. All right, quotes don't talk. They're usually just written down. So that's why you kind of want to avoid those. Plus, they sort of put a neon sign on things. And remember, too, if you've got the word page or chapter in the body paragraphs, that might be an indication that you're providing some of that meaningless context that someone who hasn't read the book isn't really going to understand. And even someone who has read the book, unless that person is a teacher who's been teaching the book for 15 years, isn't going to know what happens on this page or in that chapter. So avoid those words too. Double check for that. Okay, now before we go on to the conclusion, you're going to want to rewind this or go back and redo the body paragraph section again for all of the other body paragraphs that you have. Then when you're ready, we can go on to the conclusion. So go ahead, I'll wait. Okay, so I'm assuming that now you've finished with your body paragraphs and you're ready to move on to your conclusion. So the first thing that you're going to do is take a look at your thesis revisit. And again, put a box around the attitude for that, because it should have an attitude just like your thesis. Even though you're not using the same words exactly, it still should be kind of the same idea. So it should still have an attitude. So just do a little evaluation here. How well have you stuck to the same idea without using the same exact words? In other words, you don't want to make it sound repetitive. Question mark, plus, check 0. Remember to write the notes to future self, because future self is forgetful. Second thing you want to look at is the summary of evidence. Put brackets around the sentences that summarize the evidence that's presented in your body paragraphs. Now here, you want to look for accuracy. Make sure that you've summarized your evidence accurately without introducing new and unrelated ideas or details. Some of the people had trouble with this in the SRP essay revisions. So this is